Good evening and welcome to These Small Hours. I'm Russell Cordell Staker, and it's the evening of the 12th of May, 2020 in Austin, Texas. Tonight's essay that I'm going to read, I actually completed today. It's something I've been writing for a little bit of time, but I finished it today and I'm going to record it right now and put it out there. The title of this essay is The Slippery Craft by Russell Cordell Staker. In early 2008, I dreamt I met the writer Richard Price. We sat at a bar holding heavy glasses of whiskey and ice. He looked directly into my eyes and told me about the slippery craft of writing. I listened. I attended Ricks College in Rexburg, Idaho as a freshman in the fall of 1992 and winter of 1993. It was an academic year that began glorious and warm, and then turned crisp and suddenly cold as hell. By the time Rexburg began to thaw in late spring, my freshman year was over. The quiet campus lay on a gradual slope wide open to the light of day. It was a school both quaint and self-assured. Before the snow and ice came, pretty girls ran the sidewalks on the quadrangle in new Asics shoes. They were God's breed, all legs and pert ponytails swaying neatly back and forth. I was 6'3". By the spring, I would be 6'4". I had no plan. I simply knew the world was already mine, even though it really wasn't. I had always been a natural and omnivorous reader, but that year things changed. I wanted to earn the Queen's English and then wholly command it. Language was, and remains for me, everything. I desired to wield a power with words so resplendent and pure it would give lift to my voice and ignite every curiosity, every wild and fraught dream, and all of my earnest imagination. The classes I fulfilled did not hold my attention. I merely passed through them. What mattered were the hours I spent alone reading and searching in the McKay Library. I was insatiable, urgent. One evening in late fall, I walked through a heavy snow under the headphones of my yellow Sony Walkman. Lindsey Buckingham hissed Empire State into my ears. As I climbed the steps to the entrance of the David O. McKay Library, I noticed a plain girl in a drab overcoat slip violently and fall hard onto her knees. Her collapse was terrible. I ended the slap-strut beat in my ears and entered into a sound of bitter stillness as I crested the top of the steps. Bright folders and books lay scattered on the partially exposed concrete. The girl winced. She was in terrible pain. Her physical distress was instantly made more acute by her obvious embarrassment at falling so awkwardly. She blanched as she looked up at me, but did her level best to laugh away her obvious discomfort, even as she nobly attempted to rise to her feet, which she was unable to do. Her agony was too great, and so she relented to it, shuddering as she surrendered a sob and then crumpled into a disheveled ball. Her emotion was unfettered, even as I reached for her shoulders and gently pulled her up to a sitting position in the snow. I know I would have asked her if she was okay, but I have no memory of my words. She said nothing at all. She was too overcome. I gathered her things and then promptly slipped and fell on my own ass. Shit. I got up and dusted myself off and then regathered her things. I helped her to her feet. She walked away, and I watched her go. Wide latticed snowflakes fell in the still air. It was quiet. I was alone standing out in the open. Soft yellow light from large windows all around the campus entered and then faded into the off-white fray of raw dusk. I decided not to go inside the library. After a long minute or two, I turned and headed for my dorm. A girl edging toward 13 doesn't expect much. She knows about Santa, but decides she'll write to him anyway. It will be her last letter. Her only wish for Christmas is a soft bathrobe. Any color will do, and, if possible, a matching towel to go with it. An aging father rises early in the morning to put on coffee and fry a thick beef patty. Under the light of the stovetop, he neatly wraps a beautiful hamburger in wax paper and places it into a red igloo cooler. He fills a tall stainless steel thermos with decaffeinated coffee and cream and screws the silver cap tight. He then sets a tidy breakfast at the small kitchen table and crosses over into the room where his adult son sleeps. The two men sit at the table and share a breakfast and talk of the day ahead. When it's time, they rise together and walk out the door of the small apartment, down the stairwell, and on out to the street beyond where the city bus will take the son to his retail job in the city. "Sure am proud of you, my boy," says the father. "Love you, Dad. Can't wait to eat my hamburger." And then this sweet boy, as innocent as the day he was born, smiles as wide as the Wasatch Mountain Range behind him and presses his thick glasses up the bridge of his nose with his thumb. The two men embrace and then part. The son steps onto the bus with a firm grip on the handle of the red Igloo cooler. As the UTA bus fades into the distance, the father wonders what will become of his boy after he is no longer there to care for him. Who will make those hamburgers he likes so much for his work lunch? When I was 12, I attended a junior leadership training camp called Cedar Badge in the Grand Tetons. I learned a song there one night that I've been singing all my life since. I sang it to my daughter when she was little, and I sing it to my young sons now. It's about a man who takes on a farm, takes on life. The refrain of the song has become something of a poem to me the further I get along with my own life. The lines that count are these: "When I first came to this wondrous land, I was not a wealthy man. But the land was sweet and good, and I did what I should." Writing is indeed a slippery craft, but not in the way I thought it meant when Richard Price came to me in a dream and we had a whiskey at some delightfully empty bar. It's slippery because it requires eyesight and insight, an ability to see something when it may seem there's nothing at all to see. And not just see, but to pay attention to what is right there in front of me, all around me. It's vision and discernment all at once. The writing happens there. It's not easy. The best writing always and only just tells me enough. It's as if the writer was thinking of me when she was writing. She did the hard work of setting the sight and sound, of offering a rhythm and nuance. But then she ends there and allows me to carry her story forward and make it my own. That's the gift of language. It's communal and everlasting, and when it's shared in the most human of ways, it's not slippery anymore. It's substantial and right. At night, when I do the dishes, I put a weary mind to all of my seeming failures in life. But as the dishes are rendered clean and orderly once again, I tell myself it's okay to keep trying. RCS, 12 May, 2020. That's my essay. I'd like to offer just a bit of extemporaneous background and some thoughts about that as well. First and foremost is the dream that I had. Just as a context, Richard Price is a writer that I've admired for a long, long time, and primarily because of his ability to write dialogue, which is pitch perfect. There are a lot of great writers out there who are, in my estimation, inadequate in dialogue. And I think that's the hardest part of narrative construct. If a writer can get narrative dialogue right, it's remarkable. The book that comes to mind is Lush Life. I think it was actually published in 2008, which is probably why I had the dream that I had, because I remember I read it then, and or around that period of time. Again, this is all in the back of my mind, but I was living in Gig Harbor, Washington. I was a drug rep at the time for Eli Lilly and Company as a psychiatric hospital rep. So I would spend my days driving up and down the Olympic Peninsula and then down into Portland, Oregon, to sell various medications for all sorts of mental disorders. But I remember one of the things that I was really focused on at that particular time, as I would listen to books and as I would read, and I keep writing journals and have for most of my life, was listening for dialogue. So the idea of this dream that I had, and again, it was an idea, this was physically a dream. Richard Price appears to me, and I'm having a whiskey with him, which is ironic because at the time I was in my first marriage and I was not technically on my way completely out of my native faith at that time. So it wasn't normal for me to be in some bar, first of all, and secondly, I wasn't openly drinking whiskey, although I was when I was writing. And I have a great love and passion for whiskey, by the way. But anyway, it was very ironic. And I'm in this dream. I'm with this writer that I revere, and he's telling me about the slippery craft of writing. So it's amazing to me how that stuck with me. And I've thought about that. And that was really the catalyst for why I wanted to write this essay. As a bit of context about Ricks College, I attended Ricks College my freshman year, which would, as I'd mentioned in the essay, was 1992, 1993. And the only thing I'll say about that, Ricks College is now actually, it's Brigham Young University, Idaho. But at that time, it was a junior college, also under the umbrella of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I was born into the Mormon faith. I no longer am a Mormon. I physically left the church and had my name removed from the church records. I'm not going to get into that, but I have no part in Mormonism anymore. But as I look back on my life, the time that I had that year at Ricks College was probably one of the best that I've ever had. And I don't give any credit to the church per se. I give credit to the fact that it was a very wholesome environment. And I did some of the best reading of my life there, which I touch on. The reason why I shared the story about the girl is that I think it's very important for me as a writer to remember that in my own earnest nature to pursue the passions and the desires that I have, there are things that always come along in life that can be seen as a distraction or a detour or a peripheral, unexpected event that takes place. And yet in the moment, those become the things that are most important. And in my own earnest drive to get to that McKay library on that particular evening, which I did on so many nights by myself, I saw this girl who slips and falls on black ice, which was very common at Ricks. The snow and the ice there could be brutal, and they were really good keeping the grounds. But when those storms would hit and it would just be so bitter cold, inevitably, if anybody's ever been to Rexburg, Idaho, I'm sure they could share a story about slipping and falling on their own backside. But this poor girl, I'll just never forget the pain or the sound that came out of her when she hit the ground. And I just remember I really felt terrible for her, and I wanted to tell her so much. There was no desire beyond just wanting to comfort her, and I feel like I failed in that attempt. And it took the wind out of my sails to want to go in and try to be all self-important and pursue language. And yet that story has stuck with me all these years. The vignettes that I reach for, these are little sidebar things that as I've been writing my novel, which is soon to be coming, and I'm going to be submitting it to various agents and editors and potentially publishers. I'm sure it's going to be rejected summarily over and over again before somebody realizes that I actually probably have written a book that's worth reading. But those little vignettes that I shared, the letter to Santa Claus by the girl, the hamburger setting between the father and his Down syndrome grown son, those kinds of things are the sorts of things that stand out in my mind. I'm always reading, so I'm sure that there is a derivation for each of these and where they come from. I know that I've reached into various articles and newspapers, and I'll pick up lines on certain things that may have nothing to do with the actual story that's being written, but out of that I will get some piece of information that allows me then, as I've described in this essay, to start telling a story. And those are two examples of that. The letter to Santa, I think I got the idea for that by reading a Reader's Digest years ago. And there was a girl that did ask for a bathrobe and I think a matching towel. And I've expanded on that in just that brief way, but I don't know what I'll be frankly honest, I'm not stealing the story. It became a story of my own. I just remember I got this idea as I'd read something about that. And the hamburger story I got the idea for that years ago, probably around 2002 in my memory, when I was working for Eli Lilly and Company in Indianapolis, Indiana. Each morning I would show up very early to work because I loved to start the day reading the newspaper. And I would typically read, at that time I'd read the Indianapolis Star, which is the local paper there. I'm not sure if that paper is even around anymore. And I would read the Wall Street Journal, and then I would read the New York Times. And on that particular morning, I seem to remember, I think there was an article in the Wall Street Journal about something. And within this particular article, in this vignette, there was a story about a father late in life who was living with his grown son who liked to eat hamburgers. And so anyway, I think that's where the context came. As I read things, I'll write stuff down. And it's like putting it in a soup that just continues to grow, and I add to it. And over the years, I've just got tons of these little things, but it helps me as I'm writing. And so that's where that came from. The farm song is a very personal thing for me. As I'd mentioned in the essay, I don't need to expand more beyond that, but I will say this. The Grand Tetons, Cedar Badge was an incredibly informative place for me as a young man. It played a huge role in my life and in scouting. I am an Eagle Scout. And Cedar Badge is where I learned that song, the farm song. And the closing refrain is, when I first came to this wondrous land, I was not a wealthy man. So I got myself a farm, and I called it Muscle in My Arm. And then there's this whole litany of these little vignettes, but the closing line has always stuck with me, and that is, and the land was sweet and good, and I did what I should. And that's why I shared that, is that it has become almost like a North Star grounding poem in my own psyche. It's a song that as I'd mentioned in the essay, I've sung to all three of my kids. It's a song I sing to myself. And even as I'm talking about it, I'm getting a little emotional. It struck a chord when I was 12 because it spoke to something that I'm not even going to try to define in this. It's more a feeling and a truth that I know for myself. And I'm really grateful for that. I think that that's what I strive for as I try to write, is to remember that when I came to this land, I was not a wealthy man. And by the way, I'm not a wealthy man. But the land is sweet and good, and I'm doing what I should. And as a writer, that's all that matters. In closing, I just want to say that writing is hard. I haven't published a sentence my entire life. I'm going to be 46 on the 31st of May. I share a birthday with Walt Whitman. But it's in my DNA. And ever since I was a kid, I knew I wanted to be a writer. So what is happening and what's been happening over the last decade, particularly over the last 4, 5, 6 years in my own writing, has been phenomenal. I know it, I can feel it, and whatever comes of all of this really doesn't matter, but I know that I have a voice, and the stories that I'm telling and the places that I'm going to go with this, I think could be really, really helpful. And if they help me, then they might help somebody else. So the slippery craft, as I'd mentioned, is that it's hard. But what I realize now is that it's slippery because you have to pay attention. And when you do, you've got to use the language that you've earned to tell the story that needs to be told. The very story that somebody else may not be able to tell, but you're in the right place at the right time, discerning the right information, and then using your voice to color in those blanks. And in doing so, what's helped me in being just a human being as a writer is that as I pay closer attention, I'm also in a better place to help somebody else. So that's my message. I'm really grateful to be doing this. It feels right. And I hope somebody out there is listening. And if they are, I hope that this had something to say that made your day just a little bit better. Hang in there. I know that we're going through a really dark time right now. And all politics aside, I think all of us in this country and around the world, most people, and I'm talking about the people not in power, but most of us out there in the quiet of our own rooms at night when we lay in bed, know that what's happening in the power centers of this world isn't right. And we just have to trust that it's going to get better. I do trust in good people. I trust in humanity. And I'm so thankful for literature and just grateful for the stories that have been told, the stories that are going to be told, and the ones that I'm writing. Have a pleasant good evening. Until next week. Good night.